The letter had promised everything: a home on a hillside, a kind man with rough hands and a steady roof, a warm bed for her, and enough food to feed more than just herself. It even said there'd be chickens, 7 of them, he wrote, for fresh eggs each morning. But when Clara stepped off the train at Dry Creek Station, with her 2 travel-worn trunks and a tired hope folded in her chest, there was no man waiting, no sign with her name, no horses hitched nearby, just dust, wind, and a boy no older than 10, standing barefoot in the dirt, squinting at her like she might vanish. "You Clara Mayfield?" he asked. Her mouth was dry. "Yes." The boy nodded. "Pa's dead." The words didn't land right away. She blinked. "What?" "Died 2 days ago. Snake bite. Buried him ourselves." "I'm Sam." Clara's grip on her bag tightened. "There must be a mistake. I was to marry him. He sent for me." "Yeah. He said you were coming. That's why he wrote the letter." "He wrote it after he was bit." Number 4 said, "Maybe you'd still come anyway." Her eyes stung from the dust, or maybe from the sudden, cruel emptiness that swallowed her chest. "How many of you are there?" she asked quietly. 7, he said. "I'm the oldest." "7 children?" "Well, 6 now that Jenny's gone. She died last winter, but there's still us." He looked over her shoulder like he half expected her to turn back toward the train. "We don't got anyone else. The baby's still nursing." Clara didn't speak for a long time. The train behind her hissed and groaned, then pulled away like it already knew she wasn't getting back on. She looked down at her boots, then at the trunks she could barely lift, then at Sam, barefoot, hollow-eyed, but standing like a stone. "Where's the house?" she asked. He pointed beyond the ridge. "It's small, so am I." Sam didn't smile. He just nodded once and picked up one of her trunks like he'd done it all before. Clara followed him past the depot, her steps unsure, her chest unraveling. She had come to marry a man. She had arrived to meet a ghost, and 7 children, who now looked at her like the only thing left between them and being scattered to the wind. She had no plan, no ring, no promise to keep, only the sound of small feet ahead and her heart whispering, "You didn't come for love, but maybe you came for something bigger." The house was smaller than she imagined, 1 room wide slanted porch boards, a door that swung crooked on its hinge, and a chimney barely holding together with the weight of grief pressing down on it. Inside, it smelled like ash, boiled beans, and old cloth that hadn't seen clean water in weeks. Clara stepped in slowly, eyes adjusting to the dim. 7 pairs of eyes stared back. No, 6. The baby was asleep in a wooden crate by the fire, wrapped in a patched quilt. The rest sat at the table, thin and silent, bowls already set, as if supper was just another ghost they waited on. Sam dropped her trunk with a thud, then pulled out the only unbroken chair at the head of the table. "That was Pa's," he said. Clara paused. "Then it stays empty." Sam nodded once. She set her satchel down and stepped towards the hearth. A girl with braids and dirt-smudged cheeks stood slowly, holding a wooden spoon like a weapon. "I'm Ruth," she said. "I stir things. Mama used to, before she bled out after Jonah." Her words were too calm for her age. Clara looked at the stew. Thin broth, 2 beans floating, a single potato cut into 7. "You cook this when we can." Clara rolled up her sleeves. "Let's start again." She added water from her travel canteen, crushed dry herbs from her bag, and dropped in the piece of salted pork she'd kept hidden from the conductor back in Kansas. It wasn't much, but the smell changed everything. The silence became a tension. Even the baby stirred. She worked quickly, ladling into mismatched bowls and handing them out without fanfare. "Eat slow," she said. "Let your stomach remember it." The children obeyed without a word. Ruth blinked fast, like she didn't know if crying would be allowed anymore. Clara didn't sit. She leaned against the doorframe, watching. Her stomach ached, but she let it. One meal wasn't for her. It was for claiming their hunger as hers. Afterward, they washed up in a tin bucket outside. Sam stayed behind, sitting in the chair that wasn't meant to be filled. Clara stepped out and sat on the porch. The stars blinked in, soft and cold. The night held no promises. But in that tiny cabin, with cracked windows and children sleeping for the first time without trembling, she realized something deep. She hadn't just inherited 7 orphans. She'd stepped into a house full of unfinished hearts, and supper had been the first stitch in mending them. She found the ledger under a loose floorboard beside the hearth, tucked in a sack of oats that had long since turned to dust. It was thin, maybe 20 pages, and bound with a strip of torn fabric that looked like it had once belonged to a wedding dress. Clara opened it with the slow reverence of someone touching the last breath of a man she never met. Inside were only a few entries, dates of births, deaths, and harvests, a sketch of a chicken coop plan that was never finished. Then on the back page, in thick uneven writing, Clara Mayfield arrives June 3rd. She's to be treated kindly. She has nothing, but we'll give her everything we've got. Her hands trembled. He knew, somehow even with death on his breath, he'd written her into the story before it ended. She looked up at the room, the muddy boots lined by the door, the baby's faint cry, the small pile of shoes that didn't match. This wasn't the life she'd asked for, but it was the one she'd been handed. Later, after the children had gone to sleep with full bellies and the fire had dropped to a soft glow, Clara found Sam sitting alone on the porch, his feet dangling off the edge, staring at the sky. "That ledger belonged to your pa," she said. "I read what he wrote about me." Sam didn't look over. He knew he wasn't going to make it. "Told me to dig the grave deep and wait by the station just in case you came. Why didn't you tell me he'd written it down? Didn't want to scare you off. Didn't want to trap you either." She sat beside him. The wood creaked under their weight. "I'm not scared," she said softly. "And I'm not trapped, but I do want to know something." "What's that? What happened to your ma?" Sam sighed, a long breath that sounded too old for a boy his size. "She bled out after Jonah, like Ruth said. No one could stop it. The preacher man said it was God's will. I think it was the dust, and no help." Clara nodded slowly. "I'm not your mother," she said, "but I'm not leaving either." Sam turned his head finally, eyes rimmed with something raw. "Even if we don't behave, especially then." The wind brushed past them like a whisper from someone long gone. And in that quiet, under a sky too wide to measure, a boy who'd been burying things since he could hold a shovel, let out one small breaking breath, and leaned against a woman he'd only just started to trust. The first sign was smoke. Not from their chimney, it was too early yet for baking, but from the east ridge, where no home stood and no kin lived. Clara spotted it just after dawn, a thin gray ribbon curling against the pink morning sky. She didn't mention it to the children, not at first. They were laughing, chasing one another through the frost-bitten grass, and she didn't have the heart to stain it. But Sam saw it too. His eyes narrowed the moment he came in from fetching wood. "That's not chimney smoke," he said. "It's too dark." "How often do riders pass this way?" Clara asked. "Hardly ever. And someone building a fire on that ridge means they're watching." They didn't have locks on the door, just a wooden bar that creaked when dropped into place. That night, Clara let the stew boil longer and told Ruth to keep the baby close. The younger boys picked up on the tension fast. The air inside the cabin thickened like weather about to break. After the children slept, Clara wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped out to the porch. Sam joined her without being asked. "You thinking what I am?" he said. "That someone's come for something. Maybe for you." Clara didn't flinch. "Or maybe for the land. Maybe your pa owed more than time." Sam shifted, uneasy. "You'd leave if it meant keeping us safe." "I'd fight first." His face softened. "You don't look like a fighter. That's what makes it work." In the distance, just past the line of pine, a flicker of movement caught her eye. One man, tall, mounted. He didn't approach, just watched, and vanished again behind the smoke. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she wrote a letter by candlelight. Not to anyone back east, There was no one left to write to. She addressed it to no one, just the wind, the woods, the truth. If I fall, she wrote, let them say I came empty-handed and still made a home. At dawn, the smoke was gone, but so were 2 hens, and the wood pile had been trampled. No harm done, but it was a message, a warning. Someone had come close enough to taste their warmth. Clara gathered the children close and told them stories while they peeled potatoes. But in the corner of her apron, she tucked the broken latch she'd found hanging off the barn door. Because even here, even with a house full of children who'd begun to believe in breakfast again, there were men who didn't like when women built something without their permission. Wait, the man dismounted slowly. He didn't move like someone looking for trouble. He moved like someone who'd already lived through it. I'm looking for Richard Walker, he said. His voice was rough but measured. He's not here, Clara replied. He died 2 weeks ago. Snakebite. The man took off his hat, nodded solemnly. That's what I feared. And you are? Warren Walker, he said. His brother. Clara's heart stalled. Sam stepped forward. Pa never said he had a brother. That sounds like him, Warren muttered. We didn't part on kind terms. Then, why are you here now? Clara asked. Warren unstrapped the satchel and held it out. Inside was a ledger, identical to the one under the hearth. Same cloth wrap, same page count, only this one was full. He wrote me letters, Warren said, every month. I never answered until the last one came with your name in it. Clara's stomach twisted. He told you about me? Told me he was sending for a woman, not for himself, but for his children. Said he'd rather they have a heart in the house than just a roof. Warren looked around. Seems you got the heart part covered. Why are you really here? Sam asked. To claim the land? No, Warren said. To make sure the promise he wrote down was kept. He pulled a page from the back of the ledger, written in the same hand Clara recognized as Richard's. It read, if I die before she arrives, let her keep the house. Let her raise them if she chooses, and if she doesn't, bury this letter with me and forgive me for hoping. Clara stared at the page. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't falter. I'm staying. Warren nodded slowly. Then I'll leave you one thing. He reached into the satchel again and pulled out a small key. To the safe under the floorboards, he said. It's not much. Just the last eggs he ever saved. Clara took the key and tucked it into her apron. She didn't smile, but the weight of it in her pocket felt like more than gold. It felt like someone had believed in her before she even arrived. He arrived 2 days later, just as Clara was sweeping the porch. No dust cloud announced him, no creaking wagon or heavy boots, just a quiet figure on a chestnut horse, wrapped in a duster stained from travel, hat low over his brow, and a satchel strapped tight to his saddle. The children froze. Ruth clutched the baby and ducked behind the door. Sam reached for the rusted rifle they kept above the mantel, but Clara lifted a hand. The safe was under the floorboards, just like Warren said, tucked beneath the same plank that once hid the ledger, behind a loose stone Clara hadn't noticed before. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, bellies full, hands warm from dishwater, she lit a single candle and knelt on the wooden floor. The key was simple, almost too small to matter, but it clicked with a sound that felt like finality and forgiveness woven together. The lid opened with a creak, revealing not coins, not gold bars, but a stack of folded papers. The first was a deed written in Richard Walker's name, but never signed. Beneath it, a letter. This one wasn't to her. It was addressed to the woman who says yes, even after she knows. Clara's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the page. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And you came anyway. You have more courage than I did. I didn't send for you out of loneliness. I sent for you because I knew I was leaving. And I didn't want them to forget what it meant to be held. If you turn around now, I won't blame you. But if you stay, then everything I have, however little, is yours. The land, the name, and if they let you, the children. Not because I chose you, but because I trusted you would choose them. Clara closed her eyes, letting the words settle like soil over seed. She dug deeper. Beneath the letter was a small cloth pouch. Inside, 7 buttons, each different. One carved from bone, one from wood, one metal. A mother's collection. She realized with a sudden, breathless clarity that they were from the children's baby clothes, mementos. No child remembers, but no parent forgets. She tucked them back with care, fingers gentle as prayer. There was no gold, no fortune, but what she held was richer. The deed to a life earned through choice, not inheritance. When she stepped outside into the night air, Warren stood near the barn, hat in hand, as if he knew. "You staying?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said. "And not because of a letter, because of them." She nodded. "Because of me." He started to leave, but she stopped him. "You were wrong, you know." "About what?" "It wasn't just a roof Richard gave them. He gave them the first brick of a home, and now I'll build the rest." The wind shifted, warmer now, as if spring had taken one small step forward. It started with a cough, dry, sharp, and far too deep for a child so small. Jonah, the youngest boy after the baby, clung to Clara's skirt with flushed cheeks and tired eyes, barely able to hold his spoon by breakfast. By noon, Ruth was pale and quiet. Sam insisted it was just winter's breath catching up, but Clara had seen sickness before, and this one moved fast, like a shadow skipping through the rafters. Within 2 days, 4 of the children were sick, burning up beneath their quilts, while Clara rotated wet cloths, boiled bitter tea from pine needles, and whispered the same lie over and over. "You'll feel better by morning." She didn't sleep. Her hands blistered from stoking the fire, and her voice cracked from humming lullabies she didn't remember knowing. The worst moment came when the baby stopped crying altogether. No wail, no whimper, just limp silence that made her blood turn to ice. She held him against her chest and rocked him through the night, heart pounding in sync with every shallow breath. When the sun rose, Warren returned. He hadn't meant to stay long, just a drop-off of firewood and salted meat, but one look at the house and he dismounted without a word. "They're burning up," Clara said. "I've done all I can, but if the fever breaks wrong." Warren didn't offer comfort. He offered help. Together, they worked without stopping. He built a steam tent out of blankets and boiling water. Clara forced broth down tiny throats. She sang when her hands couldn't hold anymore. Sam, the last one to fall sick, held on the longest, watching, helping, breaking only when Ruth collapsed in the wash basin and didn't open her eyes for hours. "Is she gone?" he asked, his voice barely more than air. "Not yet," Clara said, pressing her forehead to Ruth's. "And not today." On the 4th night, Clara finally dropped to her knees beside the fire and begged out loud to no one in particular. "Don't take them. Take anything else but not them." And the fire, which had almost gone out, surged once more. That was the turning point. Ruth opened her eyes. Jonah asked for bread. The baby whimpered, and Sam, too weak to smile, simply said, "You stayed." Clara nodded, tears spilling. "There was never a day I wouldn't." That night, she didn't sleep in the rocking chair or on the floor. She lay down with the children, arms wrapped around the ones who had once looked at her like a stranger. Now they breathed because of her, and in that breath, they had given her a name no auction, no marriage, no title could ever offer: Mother. The fever had passed, but news traveled just as fast as illness in a town that loved scandal more than salvation. By the end of the week, 2 riders arrived at the cabin uninvited, men Clara didn't recognize, but Sam did immediately. One was the man who'd once offered to buy Ruth for work at the saloon kitchen. The other had come around after their father's funeral, asking questions about the land deed and whispering about custody claims. Now they stood at the gate, dressed in arrogance and lawman's tones, holding a folded paper with a judge's stamp. "We heard the bride showed up," the taller one said, sneering at Clara. "But no wedding means no rights. And these children, they're unclaimed now. You've got no legal name here. Clara didn't flinch. I have a letter, a deed, witnesses. The shorter man grinned. That might hold in town, but you're out here. This land was in debt. Your husband never paid it off. And now that he's gone, the children are wards of the county. We're here to escort them back for proper placement. The door creaked open behind her. Sam stepped out first, rifle in hand, no bullets loaded, but eyes sharper than any barrel. Ruth followed, barefoot, arms crossed, standing beside Clara like a soldier without armor. We're not going anywhere, Sam said. She's our family now. That's not your decision, boy. The man snapped. Then whose is it? Ruth asked. Because Pa's dead and Ma's buried, and this woman stayed when she could have run. Clara placed a hand on both their shoulders. You'll do no taking today. This house may not have a title carved in stone, but it was built by hands that bled for it. And these children, they're not lost. They've been found by me, and they're not going with anyone but each other. One of the men stepped forward, but Warren appeared at the barn's edge, shotgun resting casually over one arm. He didn't speak, but the quiet behind him roared louder than any threat. The men backed down, spitting dust and muttering about paperwork and sheriffs. But they left. They left because even cowards recognize when a house stands too firm to shake. Clara turned to Sam, who hadn't lowered the rifle. You stood for me. He nodded. You stood for us first. And in that moment, Clara understood what it meant to build something real. Not from bricks or bloodlines, but from the choice to love children who'd never been hers, until they decided she was theirs. She stitched quilts from old flour sacks and lined the windows with wool, singing softly while the baby tugged on her apron. Each night they ate around the table with stories instead of silence, and every evening someone new came to the door, not to take but to give. A neighbor with extra flour, a widow offering dried apples in trade for firewood. Even the preacher sent books for the children, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, with a single note. You've done what most of us only pray for. But the most unexpected visitor came in early December. A girl no older than 16, barefoot, holding a baby of her own, her lips cracked from wind, and her eyes hollow with the look Clara had once worn on the station platform. She didn't speak at first, just stood at the gate until Sam noticed and called for Clara. Without question, Clara opened the door, pulled the girl into the warmth, wrapped her in one of the patched quilts, and whispered, "You're not late. You're right on time." The girl collapsed into her arms. Her name was Liza, and her baby was sick, but breathing. Ruth took the child without hesitation. Sam made tea. They didn't ask where she came from. They didn't need to, because every saved woman looked the same when they first arrived. Thin, ashamed, unsure of whether to breathe too loud or fall apart. And Clara, now with scars instead of doubts, knew exactly what to say. "You're not here to be saved," she told her that night. "You're here to remember what it feels like to matter." Liza cried for a long time. Then she helped make breakfast. Then she stayed. That winter they became more than a household. They became a fire that spread, not burning, but warming. A place where no one knocked, because everyone already knew the door would open. The kind of place where people stopped asking who the mother was, because by then everyone knew. That winter came early, the snow heavier than in years past, and the wind sharper, howling like it had unfinished business with the hills. But for once, the cold wasn't something to fear. It was something they prepared for together. Sam chopped wood in double shifts, his back stronger, his shoulders square like the man he was growing into. Ruth took over the kitchen without asking, her hands confident now, her voice louder, sharper, even playful. Clara watched them both, and saw what survival had turned them into. Not orphans, not burdens, but pillars. The snow melted slow that year, as if even the seasons didn't want to rush away what had finally taken root. By spring, the yard was a patchwork of muddy footprints, bent fence posts, and 7 growing children, who no longer whispered at bedtime, but laughed without asking permission. The ledger now sat openly on the mantel, its last page filled in Clara's neat, careful hand. Clara Mayfield Walker, head of household by heart, if not by law. No one questioned it. Not the preacher who came to bless the land, with quiet respect. Not the neighbor who offered to help rebuild the roof after the last windstorm. Not the 2 county men who returned in February with fresh papers and red seals, and found Ruth at the door, arms crossed, rifle leaning beside her like punctuation. "We've got a judge's order," one said. "We've got a mother," she replied. They left without opening their satchel. Clara didn't have to ask what was inside. Some truths are heavier than paper and clearer than ink. That spring, Sam planted tomatoes in the corner of the yard, where his father once dreamed of building a hen house. Ruth taught Liza how to mend boots and hold babies without fear. The younger ones began calling Clara Mama without flinching. Not like it was a title to test, but a truth they'd grown into. And Clara, she never remarried, never left the ridge, never put away the letter from Richard, or the buttons she kept in a jar by the window. But she did write one final letter. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, just folded and tucked inside the old ledger with the rest of their names. "If you find this house," it read, "know that no one here was born lucky, but each of us chose to stay, chose to love, chose to build even with nothing. So if you're lost, hungry, or unsure whether the world still holds people who won't let go, come in. There's soup on the fire and a bed in the corner. We've been waiting for you." Years passed, and the house changed. More rooms, a porch swing, a coop full of real chickens. But some things never changed. The way the fire never went out, the sound of children's feet on wood, the strength of a woman who was never chosen by one man, but was claimed every day by the family that needed her most. Not by blood, not by law, but by the only truth